Special thanks to Clone Commando Nuggets for inspiring today's episode of Crappy Arguments. To be honest, I can't believe I didn't get to this sooner, but after realizing that people for real make this utterly stupid comment without backing out of it immediately, someone needs to set the record straight. Basically, today's crappy argument is, people only like the prequels because of nostalgia. People who don't fucking understand prequel resurgence and are just so desperate to put it down say this, and it's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Just like the last argument I disputed, this is a totally empty statement. After scoffing, I wasn't sure where to start with. So what you're saying is that we only like movies today because we have a special connection to them? No shit. How else would the prequel trilogy get their following with deeper assessments of them if they didn't have their following? Since none have elaborated on what they're actually saying with this empty statement, I'm going to assume you mean that since we've all grown up, we should hate the prequels just like you do. No, it doesn't work that way. Nobody just instantly jumps on a bandwagon of unfounded hatred after loving movies for years upon years. When I discovered prequel hate on the internet, I was shocked. I've heard the criticisms. Most are outdated or reductive. Most of them have been disputed by prequel fans, but most of the time, prequel haters don't make counter-arguments. They just regurgitate the original arguments in the exact same way over and over again, and after all this time, they give it in the exact same way they did 10 years ago. They never evolve their arguments. Again, none have actually looked at prequel resurgence extensively, or acknowledged that the films definitely had their following beforehand. It's downplayed heavily by prequel haters, but it existed and still does exist. Point is though, the nostalgia argument doesn't feel like an actual argument. It's just an empty statement that expects everyone to blindly hate on movies as much as them, now that we're all adults or something. People like this assume that they've already disputed prequel resurgence, but in reality, it's going to take a lot more than the empty nostalgia statement to put any of this down. But assuming that we can't take off our nostalgia goggles is so insulting. Seriously, some in my comments section treat me like I praise the prequels to death and I find nothing wrong about them, which isn't true. I have small problems or gripes with the movies, such as the pacing with Obi-Wan vs. Grievous, or the Queen's ship returning undetected. I love the prequels because of expansive world building, cool fight scenes, an interesting and intricate story, etc. All the criticisms I heard are the same ones made 10 years ago, and are made in the exact same way. Like guys, it's not 2012 anymore. It's gonna be 2023 soon as of the recording of this video. Evolve your criticisms to fit modern day observations and revelations, or don't make the criticisms at all. Like there's so many times I can hear awkward acting or bad dialogue so many times, said in the exact same way before I start to lose my shit. The awkward acting complaints are the same. Cherry-picked examples of other warrior monks meant to control their emotions, or two nervous lovers trying to communicate. As for bad dialogue, same thing. No one actually talks about context behind any of the lines. For example, I don't like sand has had the context explained over and over, and prequel haters just don't listen. I know they don't listen, because they constantly say the same things over and over again in the exact same way. This line is so bad, because who talks like this? A warrior monk taught to emotionally detach themselves to the will of the Force. That's who. Context. Like, there's a huge contrast between how Jedi talk in the prequels, and how non-Jedi talk. So here's a better suggestion I'll make in turn. Watch the movies. Actually watch them. Take off the bias goggles for once and watch the prequels beginning to end, and you'll actually enjoy them. Those who turned away from the blind hatred of these movies did just that, and they saw what they couldn't for the first time, just blindly going off the internet. Because the thing is, acting like a film buff is utterly pretentious. There are many ways to make a movie. Maybe you didn't catch on to what George Lucas was doing, that's fine, but that does not constitute a bad movie. It just means the film wasn't your cup of tea. There's a lot of movies like that. The prequels have their own identity from the originals, while still being recognizable in the same series. What you criticize about the movies, again, are outdated, reductive, and said in the exact same way it was 10 years ago. People who acknowledge prequel resurgence but want to dismiss it make weak-ass arguments and empty statements like the nostalgia argument. I don't even know where else to go with this video, because people who make the nostalgia statement just say that and never elaborate on what that actually means. Expecting people to just turn on a dime because you hated these movies from the start is just idiotic. You're treating people who have nostalgia for movies like they can't reassess movies they watched when they were younger. There's plenty of movies I watched when I was younger that I don't like today. For example, the live-action 2003 Cat in the Hat movie. I haven't watched that movie often, and now I kinda only watch it when I'm looking for a meme or something to quote from it. That's it. It's not a good movie. I certainly think it's overhated, but there is some good things about it, like the impressive set design and the fact that it just goes totally off the rails. The Cat in the Hat was the biggest example I could think of. Like, the Star Wars prequels weren't the only movies I watched when I was a kid. I remember all the animated movies like Shrek and Toy Story and Cars and Megamind and so on and so forth. There's a lot. I actually wanted to do a review on Pixar's Up, as that's ironically my favorite Pixar movie that I've seen. And I've seen a lot of them growing up, but as it stands, my reassessment of the prequels is that it's still great. There's a lot of nuance I didn't see there before. If anything, it's the prequel haters who should reassess the movies. Because as I said, you talk the same way you did 10 years ago. Catch up to the 2020s for fuck's sake. On a final note, I love how OT fanatics tell prequel fans to take off those darn nostalgia goggles when the sequel trilogy was nothing but nostalgia bait for the originals. I should probably start saying this, but your franchise isn't gonna go anywhere if you don't innovate. That's the main reason why Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny is an inevitable dumpster fire. It's just gonna be, remember this, remember that? Every indie movie is different from each other. Just look at the contrast between Raiders and Temple of Doom. Well, that's my full-on debunk. I'm JJ Plagiarisms. And until next time, what are stories but mystery boxes?
Under the mountain, a golden fountain. Were you praying that